heard some of the things that Jay and Max were speaking about, and I'm going to echo a lot of those, but I'm going to look at them with a kind of focused look of using this type of platform for Surpass streamlined delivery. Here are my disclosures, and notably, I do serve as a consultant for Imperative Care. I had to put in this slide. Tucson is 108 degrees yesterday. It is very hot. This is the Carondelet Neurological Institute, which is the only neuro ICU and dedicated neuro unit in south of Phoenix, where we do a lot of this. For the past, over a decade, aneurysms have been my passion for certain, and particularly flow diverting stents certainly have been. And with that comes kind of developed my second passion, which has been access. And the way in which we use access catheters, just as Jay shared, has dramatically changed. And it's changed the way we use them, and it's changed the way in which we practice and can perform these cases both efficaciously and safely. And when you look at flow diversion, the story of flow diversion, whether it's pipeline, whether it's Surpass, whether it's Fred, other generational devices, access is a huge, huge part of it. My experience with the TracStar LDP has been significant. I've done over 80 total cases using this. A lot of Surpass devices. We use Fred, we use pipeline, we used Web, we used wingspan stenting and thrombectomy, of course, like Max highlighted. But the point is, all these things have in common is getting a large 088 intracranial platform into position makes cases possible that weren't possible and simplifies cases that were otherwise could be challenging. And I think that you can never have too much access in your practice. But I want to focus the rest of this talk, the next 10 minutes, and leave time for questions on using Surpass Streamline. For those of you out there who are not familiar with Surpass Streamline, it was the second flow stent to market in the United States. And unlike pipeline, it is a braided 72 or 96 strand cobalt chromium single layer flow diverter that, instead of being loaded through an 0.27 catheter, is loaded through an 0.40 catheter and is preloaded. So it comes up a lot like a wingspan system, and you have a catheter with an inner pusher and the stent on it. This makes for this device to seem and be and perform in a much stiffer than traditional flow diverting technology such as pipeline. And that makes sense because of the number of strands and because of the larger, bulkier catheter system. But it is 058 compatible. Now, when you think about that, you look at the access differences and techniques that have been developed. Recently, a lot of attention has begun to focus on long sheath access and the way in which that plays out in your case when you use these systems with long sheath access with intermediate catheters as well. Jay nicely highlighted the way this platform can be your one and done catheter that goes into the brain from the leg. But when you use this with intermediate catheters such as 058, whether it's Cat5, Navi, and Sophia, whatever you pick, you can find this to be a very potent thing, which can make Surpass a much more palatable thing for people who struggle with the larger delivery system. So I want to take a couple minutes to highlight how this occurs in the next two cases. This is a 70-year-old female with a 17 millimeter ophthalmic aneurysm. This was performed awake due to her having a history of aortic stenosis. Everyone was worried about anesthesia. So there is a little degradation of the images. I apologize. So here is this aneurysm seen here in the lateral, seen here in a transorbital oblique view. Reasonable GenU system. Okay, so the first thing we do in the Surpass setup is we get the offset catheter, which is the 021 delivery assist catheter that has the body of a 38 DAC out into the MCA. And once this catheter over a 14 wire is there, we're then able to get the, I lost my system, sorry. We're then able to bring the TracStar up to the petrous. And bringing the TracStar to the petrous, there was a time when an 088 neuron max brought to around the petrous hockey stick was something of, wow, that's an amazing thing. TracStar does this in a compulsory fashion. Anyone can do this. There is nothing special about making that move. And I think that's one of the take-homes I want to get. There's nothing special about these moves. This catheter is designed to do this, and it does it routinely. Once the Cat5 is brought out into the MCA transaneurysmal, the streamline system is then loaded through. And this is where the rub of current streamline performance oftentimes comes, is when it comes time to bring the system through the Cat5. Cat5 will go to the MCA in nearly all carotid situations. But when you bring the streamline system, which the stent is a 4x30 that comes from here to here, you start to test the limits of the super soft distal access catheter Cat5. The way this can be augmented, though, is by taking the TracStar LDP and its 088 lumen, which typically you think of 088s sitting lower or maybe to the petrous cervical junction. But when you take this one easily can track. Here it is into the vertical cavernous and then up into the posterior genu. And Max and Jay showed these in their cases, but this does this with tremendous ease. It does it with tremendous low forces necessary to do that. And once that's in that position, you're able to then take the streamline system with its bulkier delivery size, and you're able to push it around into position across the 17 millimeter aneurysm. Once that's there, the typical streamline delivery process begins, unsheathing first in the Cat5. There you see the TracStar sitting down in position, as Jay mentioned, all in one single view. It's deployed, and there's the final device is open, no balloon wasn't required for this, and that's the Cat5 sitting back proximal. An example there of how using large 88 access in the setting of using a intermediate 5 French distal access catheter to simplify. The challenge of getting 5 French distal access catheters was solved several years ago with Sophia and Navion and Cat5 in particular. These catheters go distal, just like stroke catheters go distal. The question now moving forward is, can we stabilize these? And can we make that where we can bring bigger and larger things? Everyone wants to move towards smaller delivery platforms for you name it. But when you start thinking of a large distal platform that can support large things, I think our field will kind of take those blinders off to being able to harness things that are bigger. And today we might be talking about an aneurysm system, but tomorrow it might be transarterial, DBS. It could be a lot of different things. And then I always show the video at the end of this of what a surpassed case looks like. You see the significant spasm with a single, significant stasis with a single device. But what you don't see, notably, is you don't see any spasm. And that's been highlighted by Max and Jay. But I want to say it in particular because, using these catheters up in the intracranial space is very different. The place you're going to get spasm with big catheters are in mobile segments of the internal carotid artery, mainly in the cervical. This catheter always goes intracranially, every time. So much so, if you're not planning on putting it intracranially, this is not the 088 catheter you should be using. This catheter must go in. It's 95 in length. And if you don't use that length and you're going to use a 115 centimeter intermediate catheter with it, you will immediately notice that you're not going to have as much play with that or length with that as you're used to working with. So the catheter goes intracranially automatically, which puts it into a position where it's in these zones where these are kind of spasm-free zones for the most part because they're non-mobile. TracStar LDP also can enhance giant aneurysm treatment. And, this is an example of a 53-year-old female presented with a symptomatic, large/giant cavernous internal carotid aneurysm. And here you can see her vessels down here in the petrous are even small. And she has this other and that is when your petrous genu, the hockey stick, nice slight 90-degree bend, becomes a question mark or a reverse question mark. And I always look for these in flow diversion cases because this is where you get a device, even with nice anterior and posterior genu morphology, you have a braided device folded on itself. And this can really make your case become difficult to get that pushing. Once again, the offset delivery catheter tracks out into the MCA over a 14-wire of your choice. Okay. Once it's into position, what I call TADAC, transaneurysmal distal access catheter, access is obtained by, let me turn the volume off of that, by taking the Cat5 across this is now across the giant aneurysm, into the MCA, getting a nice heavy durometer there. And now comes the challenge, okay, of bringing your I think this is a 4x40 streamline device into position. And because it has to go across the aneurysm and not herniate into this large thing. Once again, the streamline system comes up And we typically pause it right there. We have that inner pusher catheter out in front, the tip of the streamline 040 catheter here coming back. And this is the position where now we bring the TracStar over it. And TracStar slides here, and you'll see on the ease in which it does this. It slides to the anterior genu, right over Cat 5, which has the streamline through it, right there. And this does this with absolute ease. And locking this catheter into these curves brings tremendous stability, which then allows us to move the streamline system into the supraclinoid carotid into position very easily to begin the deployment. And the reality of it is, and I don't highlight it in this case, but this technology can be used to be transaneurysmal as well, meaning this thing will rail around your intermediate catheter and go into the supraclinoid and beyond. And for those of you out there who are thinking about how this platform might be useful for you, you immediately start thinking of what it would mean to be able to put an 088 catheter into the supraclinoid carotid or an M1 segment. What is that going to be like? Well, the reality of it is that, like I said, this is possible. It doesn't do the spasm, and it definitely delivers for streamline. Okay, this is the frontal view of that. You see it take that reverse question mark around that bend. No catheter on the market today is able to make that curve the way that's doing that. And trust me, if necessary, this could have gone all the way probably to the MCA with absolute ease, and it has the length to do it. So once that's in place, the Surpass thing, you'll see, I think here we show, now streamline slides around. It might as well have been a pipeline. And that's the challenge of Surpass streamline. No one doubts whether 72 and 96 strands gives more flow diversion. It's just the deliverability. And when you use this large distal platform, which notice does not move 1 millimeter, as you bring a 4x40, 72 strand flow diverter into position, that allows you to harness this technology. The deployment of curves and classic outer curvature deployment, and then pulling of the pusher pops the thing. In this situation, because of its size, some coils were placed. And then here's the final. I show these videos because once again, these videos highlight the lack of spasm seen around these petrous bends where this catheter has been brought. All these catheter manipulations have been done, and the catheters and the vessels are very healthy. And this is the lateral view seen here as well. Once again, that vessel is fine. And Max was showing these empty catheter techniques, the snake technique of floating these things up. I've been able to use LDP with that as well. And once you're intracranially, some people have been concerned with the beveled tip. The beveled tip is exceptionally soft. It does nothing. You can push this catheter forward and achieve very similar results. So my summary for this short presentation is that LDP is the next generation catheter platform that can be used standalone in kind of the ways that Jay was showing it, or it can be used in conjunction with the DAC for flow diversion cases like I showed and what Max showed with thrombectomy, and used in conjunction with Cat 5 and specifically, it really enhances the delivery of 058 streamline systems. And the last one is because, listen, it's like our field is looking for new and greater ways. The arterial system is a natural pathway to the brain. And as growing neurointerventionalists come to this field, we need to find more and better ways to deliver larger things into the brain using the arteries. And it's going to be a platform like this that kind of cuts the trail for us all to be able to offer next generation treatments. And with that, thank you very much for your guys' support.